Hello, this is Tony Gaddis, author of Starting Out with Java. In this video, we're going to talk about the if statement. Quite often in a program, you'll have a statement that you want to execute only under certain circumstances. If those circumstances exist, then you execute the statement. But if those circumstances do not exist, then you skip the statement. Well, this kind of behavior can be achieved with a decision structure. A decision structure is a statement that determines whether another statement or a group of statements should be executed. The simplest type of decision structure is the if statement. Here we have the general format of the if statement. It starts with the word if, and then we have an expression inside parentheses. Now, this is a Boolean expression, which is an expression that can be either true or false. And then on the next line we have another statement. Now the if statement works like this. When it executes, the Boolean expression is tested, and if it's true, then this statement is executed. But if it's false, the statement is skipped. In many cases, you'll use a relational operator to form the Boolean expression that appears inside the parentheses of an if statement. On this screen we see the relational operators that are provided by Java, and these operators are discussed near the beginning of Chapter 3 in your textbook. These operators allow you to compare two pieces of data and determine whether one is greater than the other, less than the other, equal to the other, not equal to the other, greater than or equal to the other, or less than or equal to the other. Now, these relational operators are used to write Boolean expressions such as x greater than 0. Well, this expression is true if the value in x is greater than 0, otherwise it's false. Here's an example with the less than operator, x less than 99. It's true if x is less than 99. The equal to operator, I want to point out, is not one equal sign but two equal signs. And here's an example of how we might use it. X equal to 100. That expression would be true if the value in x was 100. Otherwise, it would be false. And then the not equal to operator is an exclamation point followed by an equal sign. And here's an example of how to use it. X not equal to 25. So if x is not equal to 25, that expression is true. Then we have these last two operators. Here's an example of how we would use the greater than or equal to operator. X greater than or equal to 50. Well, that expression is true if x is greater than 50 or equal to 50. And then we have another one, x less than or equal to 0. That expression is true if x is less than 0 or equal to 0. Let's look at an example program that uses an if statement. First, we declare a variable named test score, an integer variable. We're going to use that variable to hold a test score that's entered by the user. Then here we create a scanner object for keyboard input. In these statements we display the message enter your test score, and then we use the scanner object to read an integer, and we store that integer in the test score variable. And then we have this if statement. The if statement says if test score is greater than 90. Well, if that's true, then this statement is executed, which displays the message that's a great score. But if the test score is not greater than 90, then that statement is skipped. Well, let's demonstrate the program. I've entered it into my editor and I've compiled it. So let's run the program. Now it's asking me for my test score. I'm going to enter 99, and that's greater than 90, so we should see the message that's a great score. And we do, because the value that was read into the test score variable is greater than 90, we get the message displayed. Let's run the program again, and this time I'm going to enter a value that is not greater than 90. I'll enter 89, and we don't see the message. In fact, I'll run the program one more time, and I'll enter 90, because 90 is not greater than 90, so we shouldn't see the message this time either, and we don't. This is what an if statement looks like in a flow chart, and it helps to illustrate how the flow of execution takes place in the program when we encounter an if statement. The diamond symbol represents the test where we determine whether the Boolean expression is true or false. So in this example, we're testing the expression test score greater than 90. If that's true, the program follows this path of execution, which leads to the output operation that displays the message "that's a great score." However, if this Boolean expression is false, the program follows this path of execution, which bypasses the output operation. The statement that is executed by the if statement when the Boolean expression is true is called a conditionally executed statement. It's called a conditionally executed statement because it's executed only under the condition that the Boolean expression is true. The example that we've been looking at has an if statement that conditionally executes only one statement. Well, in many cases, you'll need to conditionally execute multiple statements. And when that's the case, you can enclose all of those statements in a set of braces. And this is the general format of how we conditionally execute more than one statement. In this format, the if statement tests its Boolean expression. And if the expression is true, all of the statements inside the braces are executed one after the other in the order that they appear. If the Boolean expression is false, however, the program skips all of the statements inside the braces. This is a slightly modified version of the program that we saw previously. And in this version, the if statement has two conditionally executed statements that are enclosed inside braces, two system.out.println statements. So when we run this program, if test score is greater than 90, then both of the statements that are inside the braces will be executed. But if test score is not greater than 90, then both of those statements will be skipped. Well, let's run the program and see what happens. Okay, I'll enter my test score, 99. And in this case, we see both messages displayed. That's a great score. Keep up the good work. Well, let's run the program again. And this time, I'll enter 88, and we don't see either of the messages displayed. Now, there is one last thing that I want to mention about the if statement. You've probably noticed in all of our examples that when we write an if statement, we indent the conditionally executed statements. Like in this program, we have two conditionally executed statements, and we've indented both of them. This is a programming practice that is followed by almost all programmers, and you should follow this practice too. And this is why. When we look at this code, we can tell, because of the indentation, that these two statements are inside of another statement. In this case, they're inside of an if statement. This makes the code more readable for humans. It makes it easier to understand. So when your instructor or when you are looking over the code and you're trying to understand what it does, at a glance you can tell that these two statements are inside of this if statement, and it just makes the code more readable. Now, does it matter as far as the execution of the program? No, it doesn't. The compiler ignores the indentation. If we took out the indentation, the program would compile and execute with no difference. But you should always follow this practice because it makes your code much easier to understand, and it's a common practice that's followed by practically all programmers.